Greetings and welcome to the first episode of the Zord Planetary Space Program. I am Zord and this is the first launch of the space program. Now, who am I and what is the Zord Planetary Space Program? Well, I am Zord, as I said. My name is Simon. I'm a 20-something male from Sweden. I have been playing Kerbal Space Program for a year, and I felt it's time to share my experiences with the world. I have no formal higher education, but I have managed to pick up quite a bit of most things during my year playing this game. As for this channel or this series, the Zord Planetary Space Program is, well, my effort to be a bit entertaining and to have something to show you. It is, the purpose of the space program is to plant a flag on every body that it's possible to land on, which means everything except Jool and the Sun. And well, Kerbin isn't really a challenge. And also, now that we have the astronaut training complex and rudimentary crew management, an additional rule is that every crew that plants a flag needs to be brought back to Kerbin alive, or the mission is a failure and it doesn't count. This will also be done using entirely stock parts. I may install some mods later on, but they will not be mods that bring in new parts or modify existing ones. This space program will be run, as I said, entirely with stock parts. I think this concludes the rules of the space program. Well, except the usual: no cheats, no hacks, no glitch exploits. With the exception that if the game for some reason bugs out or a glitch causes me to have to use, for example, save file editing to revert to a previous state, I can do that. And I think that's it. Those are the goals and the constraints of the series, which I'm starting. Now, if we were to look at what is actually going on the screen, we can see I'm doing a mission to the Moon. I'm doing it Apollo style, with rendezvous en route, even though, yeah, it was Apollo inspired more than a proper Apollo replica. And it's a good thing that we're not trying to replicate Apollo whatever, really, because we have additional goals which the Apollo program did not have. We're gonna visit and land on both moons of Kerbin on the same mission, just to get it done. So this is a bi-lunar mission, or whatever we want to call it. And we have the original crew, Bill, Jeb, and Bob, for the mission, of course. And we can take a moment to appreciate the new and glorious model for the Moon. I just think it's absolutely amazing, and it's very beautiful. And it's very interesting because all these craters are, they're three-dimensional structures, excuse me, on the actual surface, which means you now have to pay attention to what you're doing. You can't just sit with a radar altimeter and a nav ball and that will be fine. You actually have to look where you're landing so that you don't land on like a crater edge. Anyway, we are transferring our crew to the lander module. Jeb will be the pilot and Bill will be his co-pilot. These are the Kerbals who have been given the honor of being the first people to step foot on another world. So now we are powering up the systems on the lander module and preparing for the deorbit burn, which is going to take place on the night side, so that we'll land on the day side. We have lights, but the sun is a much better landing light than anything we can bring on these spaceships. And as we decrease our orbital velocity, we can see the command module, we can call it, swishing by. We're going to try to land in a crater because we want to take a closer look at them. Yeah, you can see the landscape here is different and very interesting. Also, the new ship controls are something you may need to get used to. I'm sure you have yourself noticed that the ships handle very differently these days because of the SAS changes. Yeah, we are coming in over this huge crater with a peak in the middle, which looks very interesting, so we're gonna steer towards it and try to find a flat surface to land in. That small-ish crater right here looks like the perfect spot. We're just gonna try and get our trajectory down into it and hope that it's flat enough to land on. Just taking a look at the radar altimeter, which is still a very useful tool, and looking where we can expect our shadow to appear. There it is. Now we're just going to put it down gently and carefully. I'm going to slow down the time accelerated footage here a bit so you can see a bit more realistic speeds, what it looked like when Jeb performed the first ever landing on another body. And quickly realized that none of the solar cells are facing the sun, so we just switched it around a bit. And now it's time for the whole one small face plant for a Kerbal, one big leap for Kerbal kind, or whatever. And it's Jeb who makes the first steps on an alien world. It's a very beautiful sight effect. Let's bring Bill out too, so he can admire the scenery. Yeah, he doesn't look very sad about this. I think he likes his job. Anyway, let's do what we came here to do and plant a flag. Let's see. Yeah, landing site of Gemini and Jeb was here. Yep, job done. Let's take another look at the... Yeah, that peak looks very interesting, but it's further away than I anticipated it to be. And you know, we got a ride to catch, so let's go back. Back into space, that is. We're not going home just yet. We have only completed half of our mission. But in order to complete anything more, we need to re-rendezvous with the command module. So let's go into orbit. I'm sure Bob will appreciate the company. He's been alone for several minutes. Look at that new engine effect. This was barely announced, but the effects for most of the engines, if not all of them, I haven't tried all of them, have been redone and look amazing. So yeah, we're planning the encounter, and we're gonna take one orbit in order to get the positions correct, because we're really not in a hurry. The positions, the relative positions of the moons to each other is such that we need to wait a bit to do the transfer. And we're gonna spend this time in lunar orbit and do some science and stuff, I guess, or whatever Kerbals do when they're stranded in orbit for a day. Anyway, we are coming up on the encounter, so just zero out our velocities and get close, like so. And now that we are stationary, more or less, switch to the more agile of the ships, command module, and we do the final approach using RCS and time acceleration. Our command module has a lot of fuel and almost all of it's left, and I made the choice to bring the larger fuel tanks rather than the one I usually use when I do Apollo style missions, which is the one which is one size below this one, because, well, we're not just going home after we have done it. Whoa, easy with ladders, boy. We're not just going home after we have done the MUN mission. We are doing first a transfer, and then we're gonna have to refuel our lander. So I brought extra fuel, just checking up on the lunar positions and the debris that we hope are going to fly out into solar orbit, which technically makes this flight debris free, even though it appears the escape tower managed to achieve orbit on its own and may very well be permanent debris in orbit of Kerbin. We're just gonna have to live with it. So now we're planning the encounter, and obviously something's off. I'm just gonna I pop out to check the manual, and it turns out I confused 90 degrees and minus 90 degrees. Yeah, gives you a bit of a indicator where the bar lies for the space program. Anyway, so we spent another couple of hours in Mun orbit, and then we try again. This time it's looking a lot better. It's a lot of fiddling and twitching. This transfer is not very easy to do, because in order to get the correct velocity of the Mun, you need to travel about 1 meter per second more than the minimum you have to stay in orbit. So there's a very small margin where you are escaping the Mun, but not going too far away or escaping Kerbin even. But we planned our maneuver, checking the fuel levels. We'll refuel that one later. Better to have all the fuel that we need available to the main engine. And fire away. As you can see, when we are burning our maneuver, with 1 meter per second left, we still haven't broken orbit around the Mun. So it's that last meter per second which makes all the difference. Well, that and a correction burn, of course. A correction burn that I spend way too much time making perfect. You see, we get the encounter, and then I keep fiddling to make the periapses the right height. And yeah, apparently you can do a minimus or a Mun minimus slingshot to get into planetary space. You won't get very far, no surprise there, because minimus's gravity is minuscule. It's almost as if they named it after it. And we were coming up on the node, and because I made the node so carefully, I better execute it as carefully. Yeah, maybe the maneuver node editor is one of those plugins I should install later. Yeah, now we're coming in almost a polar orbit around Minmus, which is not what we want, because we want to go home from Minmus. I want a fairly equatorial orbit, so another maneuver node, and we can do this maneuver with the RCS, because it's so slow. Yeah, another interesting feature, basically unannounced feature of the new update, is a form of RCS balancing have been brought back into the game. It's only active when you have fine controls on, when the little markers in the lower left corner is blue, and this is to ease with the translation. It very simply reduces power to RCS thrusters based on distance from center of mass. And I'm surprised they didn't really tell anyone about this, but yeah, now you know. Anyway, we have arrived at Minmus, and we are making our orbit burn. Yeah, good enough. And now we transfer our crew. Bob will be the pilot for this landing, and first I think that Bill should be the co-pilot again. But then I changed my mind, because we can't have a landing without Jeb, even if it's just the co-pilot. So Bill gets to stay in the command module. We refuel our lander, and we detach. The lander doesn't get a full load of fuel, because there's no way it's going to use up a full load of fuel. I mean, it didn't use a full load, wouldn't land on the Mun, and this is going to be considerably cheaper fuel-wise. So we get a little less, make it more efficient. And notice that there's a light going on when you time warp with this craft, which is very interesting. I wonder why. Probably some bug-like code. Anyway, we are coming into our landing site. Well, we're still some ways away, but Midmos isn't very big, and we're making a very low pass over some mountains. Beautiful mountains, but they're probably harder than my spaceship, so we're gonna avoid them. Anyway, this looks like a good place to land, so we're just gonna ignore whatever nodes I put up earlier and put it down here. And of course, when you stop your vertical movement on Minmus, you almost stop altogether, because you're falling as if you're falling through syrup, or, well, actually you're falling almost exactly the way you would be if you were hovering over a very small airless body in space. So we're coming in for the second landing of the mission. And touchdown! Beautiful view with Kerbin and the Mun in the background. And of course we need to turn the spacecraft 90 degrees. And Jeb virtually pushes his way out the hatch and ahead of his pilot, and is again the first Kerbal on another world. Let's put another flag. Jeb was here also. And yeah, we got a ride to catch, so let's make this no slower than necessary. Into orbit we go. Get ready and take off for the last time during this mission, barring no unforeseen events. Yeah, that looks like a pretty good rendezvous, at least for one that is made just by jumping off the surface and hoping for the best. I don't think we're gonna need to do the extra orbit here in order to get the positions correct. I think it's gonna work out just from the start. It does indeed look quite promising. So we're just gonna redo the rendezvous we did in orbit around the Mun. We stopped the lander when it's heading about 1 meter per second towards the command module, and we switch to the command module and take it from there, because the command module has RCS, and that's a big advantage. So we have docked, and we're gonna transfer the crew back. Quite important to get those, because we're gonna abandon the lander in Minmus orbit, as is par for the course. And look how much fuel we have left. I could have done this mission with the smaller fuel tank, but it's not a big loss to have brought too much fuel, at least not when you're going just inside the Kerbin system, because it's not very far. It's not very expensive to move stuff to other to Muns in Kerbin. Well, that's debatable, I guess. The difference between a Minmus transfer and a Duna transfer is very small in terms of meters per second needed for the maneuver. Anyway, we are going home. We are almost entering. We are entering Kerbin's atmosphere. Gonna separate the spacecraft, and this is gonna be a landing in the dark. So you are not gonna. Well, you are gonna see something. You're gonna see when we carve a fiery path through the skies as we re-enter the atmosphere at several kilometers per second. And yeah, here I spotted we are landing in what's called Crater C, or Meteor C. We're landing inside the crater, which is very exciting, because I had never been here. I never bothered to fly a plane here or try to land a rocket here. But here we are, and I'm going to time accelerate to daytime to take a look. Amazing! This is the end for this episode. Please join me next time when I do other stuff. Bye!